Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to our Record Management Network meeting. We're doing it a little bit different this time. If you have any questions or comments throughout, if you could use at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button and you can ask a question and not, oh sorry, I should have said my name's Vanessa. You can ask a question anonymously or however you want to ask it, and you can also read other people's questions in case you're wanting to ask a question and it's already been asked. Like I said, if you've got any questions, if you can't hear us or anything like that, if you could let me know via that button as well. Each speaker will be speaking for around about 10 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes, and there'll be time for questions at the end of each presentation. So if you've got a question, it will be addressed by each presenter as they finish their presentation. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over now to our Keeper of Public Records, Justine Hazelwood, and she will talk you through what PROV have been up to recently as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Vanessa. And good morning, everyone. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are all meeting today, wherever you may be. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. As Vanessa said, my name is Justine Hazelwood. I am the Director and Keeper of Public Records at Public Record Office Victoria. I'd like to welcome you all to the first Records Management Network event for 2020. This is the first one we've ever hosted online, so as Vanessa said, feedback very welcome on the format and the way it's been running. I don't know how long COVID will be with us, but we may be doing more of these in the future. So any feedback you can provide us would be very helpful. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we start today's presentation, I'd just like to talk a little bit about what PROV's been doing during this time. Despite the fact that we have mostly been working remotely, we have continued to progress on various projects. In January this year, we launched a new e-learning module. A lot of you have probably already looked at it, called Record Keeping Essentials. This module is aimed at all public servants and outlines very broadly responsibilities and requirements around record keeping in the workplace. You can access this module via the PROV website. And if you've got any queries or feedback, please pass those on to Vanessa. Her information is available on the training page of the PROV website. We're currently in the process of designing our next online module, and that will focus on digital record keeping, so stay tuned for that. Our digital archives program or digital archive program is it's a significant project and it is currently underway and nearing the finish line, thank God, and that will improve our digital archiving environment. As a result of the work, we've actually reduced our capacity to take on records transfers, as many of you would be aware, and some of our retention and disposal authority development projects. We had hoped to be able to return to our usual level of service by this time, but unfortunately, due to the project taking longer than we'd anticipated, partly due to impact of COVID, we now won't be able to take on any new project work until April 2021. If you do have plans for transfers or RDAs in the next few months, you can take this opportunity to get a bit of a head start by doing things like predetermining your agency's needs and requirements, familiarising yourself with the relevant guidance on our website. But stay tuned for when we will be taking on new work. And we will be announcing those things on our website. Once the new systems are in place, the transfer program will recommence with projects on the waiting list and high priority transfers. The Information Management Maturity Assessment Program, or IMAP, which a few of you would be aware of, was launched by PROV in January 2016. We run it every 2 years. The program requires departments and some agencies, key agencies, to undertake a survey assessment of their information management practices using PROV's Information Management Maturity Measurement Tool. PROV then analyses and reports to Victorian Government on the results. The 2020 assessment program has commenced with communications to stakeholders, and the expectation that the final report will be available the first half of 2021. PROV has published a report on the implementation of Microsoft 365, what used to be known as Office 365 and SharePoint by government agencies, with accompanying advice available on our website. We're leading a working group of representatives from government archival authorities across Australia, which is developing a set of functional requirements for record keeping in Microsoft 365. So stay tuned for that work. PROV has been undertaking a review of the mandatory standards and specifications that it sets for Victorian government agencies. New standards and specifications have been issued for strategic management, operational management, creation, capture and control of records, and managing access to records. The review of the storage standard and specifications is being finalised as we speak. Thanks to everyone who has worked with PROV on this. We've got a lot of good feedback, necessary feedback from government agencies, and we really appreciate it. We publish a range of guidance to assist agencies to manage records, as you would be aware. Recent examples are guidelines on a guideline on record keeping responsibilities when working remotely, and a guideline on implementing the operational management standard, which covers system planning, procurement and maintenance, process design, record keeping training, and record keeping considerations when outsourcing services or programs. PROV is undertaking a project to develop and test solutions to appropriately capture, store, appraise and dispose of Lotus Notes email accumulations. There's about 20 years worth of Lotus Notes email that obviously needs to be archived or disposed of. We've been running this project for a while. We've just published the Stage 2 summary report, Email Appraisal, Disposal and Preservation Project 2019 to 2020. That's been published on our website, so do go and have a look at that. It is quite interesting. A key finding of that Stage 2 project was that the Lotus Notes storage format is not a sustainable format for email records. So we do need to deal with the backlog of Lotus Notes emails before they become obsolete. Today's presentations will be focused on PROV's online record keeping assessment tool, RKAT. This tool has been developed for agencies to use to assess their performance maturity against the mandatory PROV record keeping standards and specifications. You are likely aware that this tool is now available to access from our website. And today's program will take you through a demonstration of how to use RKAT, and you'll hear from end users about their experiences in using it in their workplaces. We do have limited time, so we should get started. Again, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And each speaker will have time at the end of the presentation to answer them. So first up, we have Peter Francis, who's Manager Standards and Policy at Public Record Office. He's going to take you through an overview and demonstration of RKAT. Peter has worked in the Standards and Policy team at Public Record Office for a while now. He has 25 years experience in management, quality assurance systems development, process redesign and change management. He has a Bachelor of Information Systems from University of Melbourne. So please welcome Peter.
Thank you, Justine. Yes, and likewise, thank you everyone for joining us today. As Justine mentioned, we're running on a fairly tight schedule, so I will rattle through some bits, hopefully not too quickly for you, but with the idea of giving you a first look. There are a lot of goals for getting the RKAT out, and we're delighted that it's out and in use now. We plan to continue to develop it, and we really want to work directly with agencies on that to understand what their experience is. The key parts of it was the RKAT are that it's a proactive improvement tool for you. So it's there for you to assess, document, and continuously improve your performance. And we think that those are areas that may be done well, but perhaps they are also inconsistently done in some organisations, and sometimes it's difficult, a difficult area to start. So let's begin. Some of this stuff will just give you a look at what the RKAT looks like, but we don't require much from you to register for it. You can register using a personal email address, but we won't accept anything from you officially for representing your organisation unless it's you've registered under your work email address. Then just create a password just for this this platform, and that's all we need from you on that. Once you've registered, you'll get a dashboard, and as you start to create assessments, your in-progress assessments and your completed assessments will turn up in your dashboard, and you'll be able to directly link to those incomplete ones to work on them. You can also continue to view ones that you submitted some time ago in the form of the reports, and any ones that you've submitted as a test, you can revisit, do some more work on, and then finalise them for submission. So equally, creating a new assessment is quite simple. We really just need to know your organisation. We have added a number of other questions which we're interested in knowing a little bit about your organisation, but the stakeholders who are involved in content development were very, very keen that the tool also enable, over time, when we've built up a number of assessments from a sector, they were really keen on getting some sector summary back so that they could use it in a way as benchmarking for their own organisation against like organisations. And so you'll be asked each time you create a new assessment to put in this basic information, which will over time hopefully give you some insights into how similar organisations are running up against yours. So into the RKAT itself and back to the dashboard. So just move that there. This is the one that we entered that very simple information on the previous screen. It's just a simple council, well, not a simple council, but it's a small local council, a couple of hundred people, and that's enough information to commence an assessment. So you choose the scope for your assessment, and the range that are in here in order for you to come up with results that are actually meaningful to you. So essentially, you can do, if you're a small or simple organisation, do a whole of organisational assessment. That may be valuable to you. But by and large, most organisations will probably want to break things down a bit. A strategic level assessment will be something you can do for the whole organisation and will probably hold up. You do it once, maybe once every couple of years, and you won't need to be doing that for every little unit that you work with. There's a business unit assessment, and pretty simple to create one of those. You give it a name that you use in the organisation for it, a bit of an idea of what it does, and also if you would like to choose whether or not to assess all formats, physical or digital. There's a system assessment, and there's also one for digital transition, which you might find valuable in the coming years, as we do really want to ramp up transition off of paper. So let's just say, for the sake of it, we're doing a simple system assessment, and we get it started. So you'll get delivered a set of questions out of a question bank, and this is a subset of the questions that are valuable for system assessment. Each question will have it'll have a leading question, but then it will be followed by 5 statements, each showing you a different level of maturity. The whole goal of this is that you don't have to go off and do a lot of measurement. There is value in measurement, particularly in some technical areas, but we did not want to bog this process down with sending you off to do metrics. So essentially, you read a statement, and hopefully you find the one that's you believe you're closest to. You can put a halfway measure in if you feel you're looking a bit like this. You're looking at I've got some elements of this, but you really don't think you're there. So you can pick the halfway measure. So you locate yourself. What you then need to do is, once you've decided where you're at, provide some form of explanation about why you're there. So if it's not a particularly good place, then you might want to put in, well, we've had some mob changes or we've had some system issues. Anyway, you fill those in, mandatory. Also, what you may be wanting to do in the future, and optionally, you can add some additional notes. We really think it would be valuable if you do this in a workshop with a few subject matter experts in the room. One, it means that they're involved in the problem identification and the solution, but also it's a great opportunity to get out and talk to people in the organisation. So that's really what completion of a question looks like. The left-hand navigation shows you your progress. You can jump between questions. If you come across a couple that you really find out you have to go off and ask some other people about, you can skip to other questions that you maybe can answer on the spot. When you've completed all the questions, you then get to your completion page. Here we go. And you have, it'll show you what your status is. You can choose to submit it for testing only or for your organisation. This is quite a final button in as much as you won't be able to go back and edit it. You can continue to go back and get the reports out of it, but once you've submitted it to the organisation, you can't go back and edit it. So the testing only button is ideal if you want to treat it as a draft. So you click the testing only, you will still get the reports, so you can make use of them. You can also go and talk off to go off and talk to another couple of people in the organisation. Once you're happy with what you've put into the report, then you can submit it for the organisation and it becomes final. And very briefly, this is what your reports look like. I've actually stuck two side by side so that this is not how they normally come out, but you'll get a summary report and you'll get a full report. And the ones that you've submitted as test only will be clearly flagged as that, so you don't end up with some confusion in the organisation about what's official and what's not. So they have a similar overview at the front. We think it was important to come up with visual cues so that particularly management can quickly get their head around areas which appear to be performing well, ones not so well. You'll see, because this is a system assessment, there actually weren't any strategic management questions, and so you'll find that there aren't anything in there, so such as that. You'll get questions on operational management. This is the sort of thing you'll get with the summary under the create, capture and control, and what you'll get in the full report is pretty much what you've put in, so what you selected and then what what you put in as far as improvement and justification for where you are. This would be long reports in some cases, so you may actually want to cut and paste out of this strategically and use those in other documents and reports. The higher level summary report might be more useful for senior management. So that's those. And that's a very quick run through. I did manage to do that in 10 minutes, but as you can see, it was fairly high level. And I'm sure you probably have more questions about this over time. But please get in touch with us if you'd like to use it and you don't know where to start, or if you have some more questions about it. I think we've got time for questions now, but it's free. It's a public resource, public good, and we're very keen for people to use it and tell us what they think of it. That's it for me.
Okay, Peter, there's a couple of questions for you, if that's okay. I don't know if you can open up the Q&A box.
Let me see. Oh, yes. Okay. I'll start from the top down. Scope page does not enable you to be more specific around corporate versus admin records and operational records. For example, working in an organisation where you want to cover only corporate, admin and management records. Okay, and in the health sector, being able to exclude medical related records. We'll take that. We do run an active issues log with this product, with this tool, and we are always looking for areas to improve. So we'll take that on notice if you don't mind, and look at whether or not it's feasible in the short term to put into place. Next one, contemporary remediation actions included in the report based on the maturity at that time. Yes. with your remediation actions, you're putting in where you believe you're at the moment, why you believe you're there. So that is at that point in time. And then when you're proposing actions, if you know you've actually got some investment coming to address some of those governance issues that you've identified, then plans for action would be that. You'd say, look, we've got a program that's going to hopefully address these issues in the next year and a half. Clearly highly critical things you want to be addressing pretty quickly, but other things it's quite appropriate for you to say, look, we've got a systematic plan to work through these issues we've identified. The report's very clear and easy to read. However, we were able to export the data in other formats. Are we able to? Oh, yeah, thank you for asking that question. I did show you those 2 PDF reports. There's another link that goes along with those 2 PDF reports to download the report in CSV. Yeah, and we do recognise the value of that. Are you able to post those sample reports? Those samples are posted from the landing page for RKAT. Thank you for asking that. So if you go to this page here, you'll find that there's a link to those sample reports I just showed you. Might this be used for future by PROV to assess agency compliance? It really is primarily a tool for you to self-assess your performance. And if you put something in there that you submit to us, nobody else sees it except us, as we would with any contact you made with us. If there's clearly something that's an area which appears to be problematic and we're not sure if you're resolving that or if you're having issues, we will get in touch with you. We'll reach out to you using your email address and offer to help, much the same as we would if you asked us to come to a meeting at your place. If you ended up with a bad result, can you be audited? I think one of the, I don't know how much more time we've got for questions. I'll quickly answer this one and we might have to take the rest of them offline. Essentially, we won't be auditing you. We will be reaching out to you, as I said. It's meant to be a proactive and also a formative and constructive thing. So I don't think we would have much success with adoption of the product if you ended up getting punished for using it. When on the topic of audit, if you do happen to be audited by or investigated by goodness forbid, the auditor or the ombudsman, I think we do think that over time, if you have demonstrated through doing the RKAT, documented your performance, been aware of your issues and are actively working on the critical ones, that's probably putting you in a lot better stead than if you don't have anything to show for why the issues have occurred. So yeah, so certainly we think nobody's going to come out of these things perfectly, and so but it's probably better if you drive that process rather than letting other people identify those issues for you. I think I've exhausted our time, so thank you very much. Is that right, Vanessa? We're done.
I think you've got a couple. You've got a couple more minutes. I just they're just asking. There's a couple of questions here about whether it's compulsory as well. And I also wanted to let people know that I will be making the presentations available on the website in the coming days or early next week. I'll be checking with presenters whether I can do that, but okay. I'm assuming, Peter, yours will be available, but we've had a couple of questions asking that. So just to let people know that we will also be doing that. Okay. But if you want to answer a couple more questions now, you can.
Two here I can pretty quickly answer.
Yep.
Will there be a comparison report for councils, metro and regional? Yes, that's absolutely the intention, and that's the reason why we do ask when you commence an assessment. You just put in that basic demographic information about what sector from the pull down list the organisation is best fitting into, what the size of the organisation and the number of RM staff, and yeah, so we do depend upon people starting to put in a few assessments into there for us to build up a critical mass. So, for example, if local government authorities get into the RKAT, start generating a whole bunch of them, they'll very quickly get up to a critical mass for us to actually put out a meaningful sector summary, and we'd be very happy to do that. We're very keen to do that. the question here about whether the RKAT's compulsory, no, it isn't. In terms of the model that you put into place when you do put into place the standards which are mandatory, what you're doing is you're actually putting in a compliance system of your own within the organisation, which includes assessment, monitoring assessment, documentation and continuous improvement. That's what you're doing when you're implementing the standard suite in their entirety. This is a tool that helps you to do that, we hope. So in a way, it's actually helping you do what you would want to be doing under the standards anyway. Thank you. I don't think I've got time for any more.
What we'll do is we'll see if we've got time at the end, and otherwise we can reply to these separately. Or if people do have questions, they can obviously email Peter at his PROV email address as well. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And over to Justine.
Thanks, Vanessa and Peter. Okay, so our next speaker today is Catherine Nicholls from Monash University. Catherine is an information and records professional with over 20 years experience working in the tertiary records management and archives sector at both the University of Melbourne and now at Monash University. Catherine has a real interest in record keeping literacy and has completed multiple research projects in this space. Catherine's been involved in transforming a number of small records management programs to adapt to changing environments. Catherine is currently the records manager within eSolutions, the IT division at Monash University. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Justine, and thanks, Peter and PRO for inviting me today. I've got my colleague Sandra just assisting me a little bit as I'm a little under the weather. So I was asked today to speak to about our user experience with RKAT. As I'm representing Monash Uni, I do need to include a slide from our marketing and comms team. They always insist on that in our corporate slide pack. This isn't to brag, obviously, but we are a rather large institution, and I should say that Monash has always invested well in its records and archives program. We have approximately 4.5 FTE in the records program and 3 FTE in the archives. And as Justine mentioned, we sit in the IT division at Monash, which is known as eSolutions or eSols locally. Within the records management side of things, we've not had a central registry for a number of years, and our role now is much more about governance. So we still use TRIM, but we are not as focused on that. We're more focused broadly across providing governance to the whole of the university. So the records footprint, if you will, is quite large and diverse, as it will be for many of you out there today. As you can see, yeah, we've got multiple campuses. We've got a very large student base. We've got a very large research base. It generates a lot of different types of records. My main interest in speaking today is not to focus as much on the specifics of RKAT, although we have used it and the website and forms are really easy. It's been designed really well. But what I'm going to speak to today in my time slot is about the value of using RKAT and especially the report you get at the end of it, which Peter flashed up some samples. I think it's good to know the RKAT is a really flexible tool, and in some cases, like for us, it's been a really good starting point to think about reporting, especially on what to report on and how to visually represent it. As records and archives professionals, I think we all know the value of having our senior executive on board with what we do. In the past, that might have been, and it still is to a point, talking about and reminding user groups about compliance, say against the PRO standards. But we might also want to remind our executives what our professional skills bring to the table in terms of ensuring that we are keeping the right records in the right way for our respective organisations. At our program at Monash, we've been fortunate to have been part of a really large and dynamic IT division with sometimes upwards of 600 different IT professionals and specialisations. So that's the size of our IT division. Sometimes it's been larger than that. We've been there since 2011. As a large division, like many organisations, it's very focused and interested on the show me the data line, and for good reason. IT services, programs and systems are expensive, they're resource intensive. And our executive needs to know good data about how many students want to use something or how many staff are expected to use something, what the researchers might want, local anecdotal information, or we think this group might want X or Y is obviously not going to cut it in that environment. Decisions and budgets need to be based on statistics, metrics and evidence that demonstrate that you know who your clients are and that you can actually demonstrate with actual data what you're contributing to and doing for the organisation as a whole. So we do increasingly live in a world where, unfortunately, fake news and misinformation are rife. So I think it's important that we represent our programs' achievements with actual data that sits on a par with how other groups in our division report. And this is where, for me, the real value of RKAT lies. So I think when within our own group at Monash, when we were initially asked to provide this sort of data, which was probably a couple of years ago, our teams weren't actually really sure how to deal with that. More importantly, we didn't know how we could align the kind of work that we do in records management alongside, say, what IT people do. As mentioned above, a lot of our work involves consulting and providing advice in a governance role. And how does that actually translate to meaningful data when you're just counting, are you just counting the inquiries per se? And that might not actually even reflect the true picture, especially when some of your consults might spread over weeks of work. And then how do you measure things going on out in areas of the uni that were outside your immediate custody or control? So we really had to think about how we could report meaningfully on records that sat in systems or areas that we had no direct access or visibility over. And we actually only look after a very small percentage of records ourselves locally, but we provide advice to the whole university. So where many of those areas are actually expected to self-manage according to our advice. So how do we actually measure that, even using guesswork or guesstimates to put in things for those where you think things are actually going to be sitting in those assessments on the RKAT. So one of the many things we've learned from working and reporting alongside our RT colleagues is that reporting needs to actually involve more than just the halftime score. So it's often not enough just to say we have done this. Like it's not enough to say that, oh, we captured 2,000 records this year. We can show that, but we also need to show where we plan to go next. And what does that 2,000 records mean in context? Is it above or below average? What is the story it's telling the uni? Should we be seeing a higher number or lower number? And why do we expect this and why? And how do we plan to win the next half of the game, kind of thing? So our executive often want to know what the levers are. So this kind of reporting with the RKAT gives them visibility and then often choices as well. So they can say, well, if we gave you more of this resource, you could do more of Y. Or if we took this away, we can clearly see what the impact might be on you in the next quarter, for example. So my advice is to use the RKAT to tell your own program data-driven story and to use it to focus on things such as, you know, what is your program doing well? What areas you want to improve on? What do you want your exec to know? And also what you might need from your exec or even the PRO, as Peter mentioned, to help you reach your next program goal. I think be happy too that the report generated puts the results into simple and accessible format, so accessible for other people outside your group to read it. Those colours and charts with meaningful measurement indicators are really easy for other groups to digest and respond to, so they can actually get to the bottom line quickly. I think as records and archives people, and I've worked in the field for over, I guess, 20 years, we can get a little bit excited sometimes about detail and nitty gritty, and it can be a little bit painful sometimes just to put up simple figures in case, you know, we worry if it misrepresents us or we're missing out on some critical detail. And the downside of that approach is that sometimes we can unintentionally overwhelm our executive audiences with a bit too much information. We can also sometimes think, wow, we have their attention for 5 minutes, so we'll try and tell them absolutely everything about our program and what we want to do. But I think the RKAT model, as you saw with those reports, allows you to just highlight things at a big picture, and it does the work for you with the report. You're just simply plugging in answers to questions. So my advice would be to start small. And as Peter said, you don't need to have data. You don't need to have the metrics. You can just start with estimates. And if you need to go back later, then to support certain claims, then, you know, by all means, it gives you a starting point about what data to collect. And because RKAT doesn't require hard data, you do have the option to provide, but if you do want to provide additional comments, you can. So you can provide that if you've got it. I know some of you might be interested in how we went about dealing with knowing what to report on in more detail, as I've mentioned that, but that might be for another sort of presentation in its own right. But by all means, reach out to me if you want to hear about more what we've done at Monash. But we had to invest in some additional skill sets and bring in some expertise. And we did this via a maternity leave opportunity to help both myself and the team rethink how we represented what we did in terms of reporting. And it's been a long process as well. But I say regardless, I think the RKAT tool is a really great place to start and check in with. And I really, commend the PRO for taking the initiative with it. And I think it's really worth having a good investigation of the tool if you haven't already. So that's me.
Sorry. Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you, Sandra, for your tech support during that. Are there any questions for Catherine? And while if you're writing them out, I'll just let everybody know as well that Peter is in answering the questions that were in the Q&A box that he didn't get around to answering. So if there was something in there that you were interested in knowing the answer to, if you pop into that Q&A, you'll be able to see all the questions that have been answered, and he's in there at the moment responding to those queries live, or live typing, but live. So if there's any questions for Catherine, shoot. Okay. Not sure if anybody.
There is one for Catherine.
Okay.
I can just see Catherine now. I can't see the question.
Yes. So I had to follow it up. There's what level of reporting did you do? System, strategic?
We've probably done a range with our detailed metrics. We look at how many records systems we've assessed. So we're looking at systems outside of TRIM. The university's got upwards of 600 different systems that could contain records. So we're working through assessing each of those. We've also reported on things like big data. So we've got a lot of data that's sitting in unstructured environments like file shares and so forth. And we measure those more by, I guess, terabytes. And Sandra has a lot to do with that in terms of reporting back on data that's being destroyed in accordance with disposal schedules. The archives does a lot of individual reporting as well on its holdings and its access requests. So yeah, we do a huge variety of different types of metrics, and it has taken us a while to get into some of that detail and make it meaningful, rather than, as I said, just reporting on how many records are in a system or something, because that's often not enough. And that's, yeah, so I hope that answers the questions. So the question there from Alison. Catherine, are your team doing the assessments or different departments? We're doing the assessments at the moment. So my team does those assessments. Yeah. We work though with those departments and areas. So we're in constant contact with our clients, and they help us answer the questions that we use in our assessments. But we organise all of that ourselves within our team.
Okay, if there's no more questions for Catherine, we'll move on. If you do have questions for Catherine, type them out, and Catherine, I'll just ask that you just monitor the Q&A box as well in case there's something that's related to what you've just spoken about. Thank you. Over to Justine.
Okay, so thank you very much, Catherine. And we now have Marlyn Assad from the Department of Health and Human Services. Marlyn is an information and records professional with more than 15 years experience across the corporate and public sectors. Marlyn is passionate about improving information management practices through stakeholder engagement, awareness building and capability uplift in large and complex public organisations. Marlyn was part of the Records Reform Program at the Department of Education and Training for 3 years as part of the Records Engagement team. She's now leading the Records Maturity Assessment Program at the Department of Health and Human Services. So a welcome to Marlyn.
Thank you, Justine, and thank you, Justine and Peter, for inviting me to present today. I will be talking about how we use the RKAT tool in the Department of Health and Human Services as part of a program to improve record-keeping practices and compliance. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so the way we use the RKAT tool in the Department of Health and Human Services is basically as part of the program that we implemented in February this year to lift capability and improve the maturity levels in record keeping across the department. So some background information. So on the 8th of March 2017, the Department of Health and Human Services was audited, and we actually, one of the main recommendations in the VAGO report was to establish a record-keeping maturity assessment program or a compliance assessment program to monitor record-keeping practices and compliance and report to the Secretary. So the way we've implemented this is by creating a maturity assessment program as part of our continuous improvement. And this program was launched in February 2020. And basically the program aspires to uplift record-keeping practices through the effective engagement and communication partnership with business areas rather than a strong focus on compliance. It aims to ensure that the department staff are knowledgeable and well equipped to meet the records management legislative obligations. So the purpose of the program is to act as an inventory program aiming to assess and analyze records keeping maturity and practices as a baseline to inform better records management service offerings. It also aims to build partnerships with business areas and agree on a future approach. Design a roadmap to improve record-keeping maturity. So it's more about working with business areas to actually and hold their hands to actually improve their practices and solve the problems and work on the challenges they are facing. The purpose also is to identify areas of improvement in record-keeping practices that are not meeting PROV standards, and that's where the RKAT tool fits perfectly well, and it's basically ticking all our boxes in terms of what we would like to assess, how we would like to present it in terms of reporting. So also based, this program is also focused on tailoring services and projects, as well as connecting our customers and stakeholders to expert advice to achieve the best outcomes and solutions for business areas, and accordingly DHHS-wide continuous improvement in records management. And when this happens behind the scenes, our compliance definitely will increase. So our focus at this stage is to set a baseline and provide meaningful targeted services to improve record keeping over time, showing continuous improvement across DHHS. So it's not a one-time event, but it's actually a business as usual program. So for this year, we're trying to get that baseline, and in the next coming years, we will continue to assess and report to showcase improvement. So this is basically a very simple introduction about the program. And I'll focus more on this slide in terms of how we're using the RKAT tool within the program to report, to engage, assess, and report on the standards. So it's basically the whole process is designed in 6 steps. The first step is to engage, and we engage at a really high level, DEPSEC level, with executive directors and DEPSECs to promote for the program and explain what it's all about. So rather than introducing it as an assessment or a compliance activity, it is basically an engagement activity where we provide services and projects to our stakeholders. Following the first engagement, we hold other next meetings with branches, for managers and directors of the different branches across DHHS and its administrative offices. We discuss what the program is about, and we set expectations in terms of the types of questions, who should be involved in the assessment in terms of answering those questions and so on. Then we move into the assessment phase, which is the discovery phase. And in this phase, basically, we do it in a hands-on, engaging workshop style. So we request from each branch to nominate 1 or 2 representatives, or sometimes 3 if they would like, from each unit within that branch. And then those representatives join me in an assessment workshop where we go through the questions and we have a lot of discussions about each question. So I explain the question in easy ways for people to understand, and so that they can relate to what they do every day. And this is a very good way as well to understand about their practices and their challenges, and what they would like to see, what services they would like from us as a records management unit. Following the workshop, I do an analysis of the results, and for each branch, I provide an average result to actually cover all the workshops or all the units. Sometimes, if the branch is quite big, I do run more than 1 workshop, and this is depending on the types of records managed and created within each unit. Sometimes they're very different. So there is no point bringing people together to talk about records while the records are very different in types, format, the way they manage them, and the practices and policies are different. So in this case, I do split the branch into 2 or 3 workshops, depending on the types of records and what's required. And the final report is basically an average of the number of assessments I conducted. So, for example, Family Safety Victoria is part of DHHS. I recently assessed the whole organization. Basically, I conducted 16 workshops, and And the overall result is basically an average of the 16 assessments I conducted. Once the analysis is completed, we present a report to the business area or at a branch level as well. And we discuss the recommendations and findings, and we require that they approve it, and we start working with them on improvement. So the aim is that we create a partnership when we present that report, rather than showcasing that things are not, things haven't been happening in the right way, or they are not compliant in any way, but basically saying, so this is where you're at the moment, and we are here to support you. We're here to help you improve your practices over time. In terms of reporting for the maturity, for example, if one area is, let's say, the strategic management standard, a particular area has been scored 2.5 out of 5, then the focus would be on recommendations that would actually benefit our stakeholder in terms of day-to-day activities. So making sure that things become easier for them to meet the records management obligations, but at the same time, we aim to increase the maturity within the 12 months. And as I mentioned before, this continuous improvement is not only done through the recommendations. We actually looking at tailoring projects and providing new services for our stakeholders to support them in this journey. And as I mentioned, the assessment is done at a branch level. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
There's a couple of questions there for you, actually, Marlyn. If you have a look, there's one from Lindsay that asks, during the process, do you have a change management plan to help staff and units to fully implement the change in record keeping? Yeah.
So what we're doing at the moment, so the record keeping maturity assessment program was initially part of the compliance and policy team. And given that it is more focused going forward on improvement, it's now part of a new records customer engagement team. And that's actually, we're looking at involving customer engagement officers in supporting those activities over time, as I mentioned. We do not have a change plan as yet, but we're looking at, in terms of recommendations, we're looking at simple recommendations at a strategic level so that we are able to get the best outcome for our customers. Maybe down the track, there might become a need of having a change plan in place, but not as yet.
Great. Chelsea also asked a question. John Nelson has asked, did you have the senior manager to support, and how did you gain their support, and how long did that take?
Okay, so that's this is actually one of the challenges we've been facing so far, and the way we managed to overcome it to a great extent is, first of all, as a department, that program is a requirement. It is a VAGO recommendation that we've got to have a continuous improvement program in record keeping. And to actually get people to participate and engage with us, we start from the top of the tree and go downwards. And that's why, if you remember my slide about engagement, we engage at the exec level or executive director level, on a divisional level, I mean. Once we get the support of the executive directors, we start gaining the support of the directors and managers within each branch, and we move forward. Definitely, sometimes we face challenges, but I think it is quite important to make sure that our message is clear, and the message is basically, we're doing this for you. We're here to support you. As public servants, we all do care about records, and this is not questionable. We all would like to do the right thing, but sometimes we need the tools and we need the advice and guidance to be able to move in the right direction. And that's what this program is about.
Okay, question from Heather Morrison. Marlyn, did you get much pushback from the business units?
Okay, yes, so if you start at a business unit level, our experience was that sometimes you get a lot of confusion, and that's why we changed our approach now, and we start at a divisional level, really high level. So we get DevSec support, executive director support, and it filters down. And we find that when you get the leadership support, people usually are more keen to listen and to participate. So we've experienced this few times, but definitely we did get some pushback, and accordingly we changed our approach to overcome that. It's important to actually note that people, when they come to actually attend the workshop, though our message has always been very clear, this is not an internal audit, it's not scary, it's not about compliance, we're not here with a stick, but people feel anxious about it, like the idea of being assessed. And that's why I start all my workshop with a discussion to just get people to relax. And I give them one question as an example to talk about it and get them to understand that this is just a discussion. It's a very simple activity. Yeah, and I think that works really well. And we depending on word of mouth. So when people come, have a good experience, and down the track when they see improvement, I'm sure that this pushback will reduce a lot. Well, actually, recently I got a request from one branch within DHHS to participate in the program without us initiating the engagement, which is a great outcome and a proof that people have had a good experience, and that we can find people out there who really do care about records, and they're happy to go through assessments and do whatever it takes to improve their practices.
Thank you. Karen has asked how you're achieving or planning to achieve PROV compliance using Teams. Okay.
Well, this is a very complex question. We're waiting on PROV to actually provide us with more advice in terms of Office 365 and its applications. As a prior user of SharePoint EDRMS, I understand how important it is to actually implement a compliant a records management tool to be connected to Office 365. At this stage at DHHS, we have not done that yet, but we are having a lot of discussions. We're looking into options, and there are particular teams within the department working on this. Our plan going forward in the interim, until we find this magical record-keeping solution to be connected to Office 365, our plan is to give people more guidance, give them more advice on the right information in the right system and the right time. We cannot just insist that people do not use any other system because it's not compliant, particularly in COVID-19 days where everyone is working from home. People need to use Teams and SharePoint to collaborate, but it's about making sure that when the time is right, they need to move the records into TRIM. So it's about balancing compliance with user experience, and it is very important to get user support, and that's why our messaging has had to be very clear. To pick our battles, I guess.
Okay, we might just quickly answer one or two more questions. Now wants to know how long it took to do the assessment.
So before COVID-19, the workshop was meant to go for 3 hours. And it was definitely more hands-on because I was looking at collecting more information, given that staff are in the room anyway. So I was looking at raising awareness of record-keeping obligations as an introduction, and then going through the assessment, collecting information. But COVID-19 all happened in March, so I only managed to run one workshop face-to-face. And since people are working from home and a lot of people have caring responsibilities, I realized that 3 hours will not be possible. So it's been reduced. So a lot of information I gather by email. The assessment itself takes 1.5 hours to complete in the workshop. I've done some mapping of the questions as well. So some questions are quite universal, meaning that they apply on a departmental level rather than a business unit. For example, the policy for record keeping, the strategy for record keeping, business units do not have much input about them. So I go through the questions about their awareness of their obligations and the policy and the strategy, but actually the things that are departmental wide, I've already coordinated the responses from across the department. So out of the 45 questions, we cover around 20 to 25 in the workshop, and the rest of the questions are already we've already got the answers because we know about the systems and we know about the policy and the strategy and so on.
Sorry, I'm conscious of the time. We're just running over time a little bit. We might wrap it up there, and I will, the questions that are still in there, I will send to you, Marlyn, to make sure that you've got them. There is just one from an anonymous person that is what's the roadmap for record keeping at DHHS? Is it content manager or SharePoint? And I'll just get you to quickly answer that one if you can, because I don't know who to direct your response to.
Yeah. All right. So I can't answer this question because there are other units and colleagues within DHHS who are looking into our options going forward. What I can confirm is that TRIM is our compliant record management system, and until we have another solution, it is what we need to use. In saying that, we still encourage staff to use SharePoint and Teams and all Office 365 applications for collaboration purposes. That's all what I can provide at this stage because it's not finalized, and I think we are still having a lot of continuous discussions about our next steps.
Thank you, Marlyn.
No worries.
I will go back to Justine now, and I'm just conscious of the time, and I noticed there's a few attendees who are now leaving, so people have probably got to get to other meetings and commitments. So I'll pass back to Justine, and I will pass your questions on to the relevant presenters.
Thanks, Vanessa, and thank you everyone for attending today. That does conclude today's presentations. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for presenting today. Lots of interesting discussion in the questions, and I look forward to seeing you possibly in the flesh or maybe virtually again at a future RMN event. Thank you, everyone.